Rachel Brooks sat at the polished mahogany table in her father's dining room, the same table where she'd once carved her initials as a defiant teenager, now a 42-year-old woman who'd turned a crumbling family legacy into a $50 million tech empire. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on the faces of her family. Her father Henry Brooks, his grey hair thinning but his eyes still sharp. Her mother Ellen, whose nervous smile betrayed her discomfort, and her younger sister Claire Bennett, 38, whose poised elegance had always made Rachel feel like the awkward, overlooked sibling. The air was thick with the scent of roasted lamb and unspoken tension, a tension that had simmered for years but was about to boil over in a way Rachel hadn't anticipated. 10 years ago, Brooks Innovations had been nothing more than Henry's failing computer repair shop, a dusty storefront in downtown Seattle where Rachel had spent her summers learning to fix motherboards while Claire was off at cheerleading camp. Henry had been a tinkerer, not a businessman, and by the time Rachel graduated college with a degree in computer science, the shop was on the brink of bankruptcy. Claire, the golden child, had no interest in the family business. She'd married young, to a charming but lazy lawyer named Daniel Bennett, and spent her days hosting charity galas and sipping rose with her socialite friends. Rachel, on the other hand, saw potential where others saw failure. She'd taken over the shop at 28, pouring every ounce of her energy into transforming it into something greater. She taught herself coding late at night, developed a software that streamlined small business operations, and pitched it to anyone who'd listen. Her first big break came when a local chain of coffee shops signed on, and from there, Brooks Innovations grew into a tech company that now served clients across the country, from mom-and-pop stores to mid-sized corporations. Rachel had sacrificed everything for this success: relationships, sleep, even her health at times. She'd missed family holidays, working through Christmases while Claire posted photos of her perfect family on Instagram. Rachel didn't mind the grind, she thrived on it. The company was her baby, her proof that she was more than the difficult daughter Henry had always sighed about. But now, as she sat at this dinner, her stomach churned with a mix of pride and dread. Claire's voice cut through the clinking of silverware like a knife. "I think it's time I took a bigger role in the company," Claire said, her tone calm but laced with entitlement. She adjusted the diamond pendant on her necklace, a gift from Daniel, and smiled at Henry as if seeking his approval. "I mean, it's a family business, right? I'm a Brooks too." Rachel's fork froze halfway to her mouth. The words hit her like a punch to the gut, a betrayal so sharp it stole her breath. She set the fork down carefully, her hands trembling, and forced herself to meet Claire's gaze. Her sister's blue eyes, so like their mother's, held a glint of challenge. Rachel's mind raced, replaying the years of Claire's absence. How she'd never once offered to help when Rachel was pulling 80-hour weeks, how she'd laughed off Rachel's late-night calls about cash flow problems, saying, "You've always been the smart one, Rach. You'll figure it out." And now, with the company finally thriving, Claire wanted in? It wasn't just unfair, it was a declaration of war. Henry cleared his throat, his voice gravelly from years of smoking. "Claire's got a point," he said, his words slow and deliberate. "It's a family business. Maybe it's time we brought her into the fold. She's got ideas, you know. Fresh perspective." Rachel's heart sank. Of course Henry would side with Claire. He always had. Growing up, Claire had been the princess, the one who could do no wrong. Her dance recitals were attended, her straight-A report cards framed, her every whim indulged. Rachel, 2 years older, had been the rebel, the one who asked too many questions, who stayed out too late, who didn't fit the mold of the perfect daughter. Henry had never understood her drive, her need to prove herself. Even now, with Brooks Innovations as her crowning achievement, he couldn't see her for who she'd become. To him, she was still the difficult one, while Claire was the golden child who could do no wrong. Ellen reached for Rachel's hand under the table, her touch warm but fleeting. "Let's not rush into anything," she said softly, her voice a plea for peace. But Rachel knew her mother's words wouldn't stop the storm that was coming. She pulled her hand away, her chest tight with a mix of anger and hurt. She'd built this company with her own hands, her own sweat, her own sleepless nights. She'd taken the risk when no one else would, and now Claire thought she could waltz in and claim a piece of it? "Over my dead body," Rachel thought, her resolve hardening like steel. She looked at Claire again, really looked at her. Beneath the polished exterior, the designer dress, the flawless makeup, Rachel saw something else: ambition. Claire wasn't just here for a title or a paycheck. She wanted power, control, maybe even to prove that she could outshine Rachel in the one area where Rachel had always excelled. The realization sent a chill down Rachel's spine. This wasn't just a family disagreement. This was a battle for everything she'd worked for, everything she'd sacrificed. And if Claire thought Rachel would step aside without a fight, she was gravely mistaken. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of forced small talk and clinking glasses, but Rachel's mind was elsewhere. She thought about the early days of Brooks Innovations, the nights she'd spent alone in her tiny apartment, coding until her eyes burned, the rejections from investors who'd laughed at her little project. She thought about the first time she'd seen her software in action, the way the coffee shop owner's face lit up when he realized how much time it saved him. She thought about the team she'd built, the loyal employees who'd stuck with her through the lean years, the clients who trusted her to keep their businesses running smoothly. All of it was hers, her vision, her legacy. And now, Claire wanted to take it away. As the evening ended and Claire hugged her goodbye, Rachel felt the weight of her sister's words settle into her bones. "We'll talk more about my role soon," Claire whispered, her breath warm against Rachel's ear. It wasn't a promise. It was a threat. Rachel nodded, her jaw tight, and watched as Claire and Daniel left in their sleek black SUV, their taillights disappearing into the rainy Seattle night. Rachel stayed behind, helping Ellen clear the table while Henry retreated to his study with a glass of whiskey. The house felt smaller somehow, the walls closing in with the weight of what was to come. Rachel knew this was only the beginning. Claire wouldn't stop until she got what she wanted, and Henry's support gave her the leverage she needed. But Rachel wasn't the same girl she'd been growing up, the one who'd let Claire take the spotlight while she faded into the background. She was a fighter now, a woman who'd built an empire from nothing, a woman who wouldn't let anyone, not even her own sister, tear it down. As she drove home through the rain, the city lights blurring through her windshield, Rachel's mind churned with plans. She'd need to protect the company, rally her team, maybe even hire a lawyer. She'd need to confront Claire head-on, lay down the law, make it clear that Brooks Innovations wasn't up for grabs. But more than that, she'd need to face the deeper wound, the betrayal of her family, the realization that the people she loved most didn't truly see her. It hurt more than she'd expected, a raw ache that settled in her chest. But Rachel had survived worse. She'd survived the doubters, the setbacks, the long nights when she'd thought she'd fail. She'd survive this too. The storm was coming, and Rachel Brooks was ready to fight. Rachel Brooks stood in her corner office on the 15th floor of Brooks Innovations' sleek Seattle headquarters, staring out at the gray skyline as rain streaked the floor-to-ceiling windows. The city below buzzed with morning traffic, but up here, the silence was heavy, broken only by the soft hum of her computer. It had been a week since the family dinner, a week since Claire's declaration had turned Rachel's world upside down. 7 days of sleepless nights, her mind racing with scenarios, each worse than the last. She'd built this company from nothing, and now her own sister threatened to tear it apart. But Rachel wasn't going down without a fight. The office around her was a testament to her success. Modern, minimalist, with a glass desk, a few framed awards on the wall, and a photo of her team at last year's holiday party, all smiling, all loyal. She'd handpicked every one of them, from her CFO Priya Sharma, who'd helped secure their first major investor, to her lead developer Marcus Tate, whose coding genius had turned her software dreams into reality. They trusted her, believed in her vision. But now, with Claire's ambitions looming, Rachel felt the weight of that trust like a stone in her chest. She couldn't let them down. Her phone buzzed on the desk, a text from her mother, Ellen. Claire's coming to the office today. She says she has a proposal. Please don't fight. Rachel's jaw tightened. A proposal. More like a power grab. She'd known Claire wouldn't waste time, but this was faster than she'd expected. Rachel had spent the past week preparing, meeting with her lawyer, reviewing the company's bylaws, ensuring her majority stake was ironclad. She'd also called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow, hoping to rally support before Claire could make her move. But now, Claire was forcing her hand. At 10 a.m., Claire swept into the office like she already owned it, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, a tailored blazer hugging her frame. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm, her smile as polished as her appearance. Behind her trailed Daniel, her husband, his expression smug, his tie a little too loud for a business meeting. Rachel stood to greet them, her own outfit, a simple black dress and flats, feeling understated in comparison. But she didn't need to look the part. She was the part. This was her domain. "Rachel," Claire said, her voice syrupy sweet as she air-kissed both cheeks. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to talk about my role in the company. I've been thinking a lot about how I can contribute." She sat without being invited, crossing her legs with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. Daniel took the chair beside her, his presence a silent reminder of the legal muscle he might bring to this fight. Rachel sat slowly, folding her hands on the desk to keep them from shaking. "I'm listening," she said, her tone neutral, though her pulse raced. She'd spent years learning to mask her emotions in boardrooms, but this wasn't just business, this was personal. Claire opened her portfolio and slid a glossy document across the desk. "I had a consultant put this together," she said. "It's a proposal for a new division, Brooks Lifestyle Tech. I'd lead it, of course. We'd focus on consumer-facing apps, wellness, home management, that sort of thing. It's a natural extension of what you've built, but with a broader appeal. I think it could double our revenue in 3 years." Rachel skimmed the document, her stomach twisting. The proposal was slick, well-researched, with market analysis and projected growth charts. Claire had clearly spent money on this, which meant she'd been planning it for months, maybe longer. But beneath the polished numbers, Rachel saw the truth. This wasn't about growing the company. It was about carving out a piece of it for Claire to control. A division of her own, with her own team, her own budget, her own power. And if it failed, the fallout would drag Brooks Innovations down with it. Rachel had seen too many companies overextend and collapse. She wasn't about to let that happen on her watch. "It's ambitious," Rachel said carefully, closing the document. "But we're not in a position to take on something this risky right now. Our focus is on scaling our core software for small businesses. We've got contracts to fulfill, clients to support. A consumer app division would stretch us too thin." Claire's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "That's exactly why we need this, Rachel. You're playing it too safe. Brooks Innovations could be so much more, a household name, not just a B2B vendor. I've already talked to Dad about it. He thinks it's a great idea." Rachel's blood ran cold. Of course Claire had gone to Henry first, knowing he'd back her up. Henry had never understood the tech side of the business. He still called the software Rachel's little program. But he loved the idea of being a big shot, of seeing the Brooks name in lights. Claire was playing to his ego, and it was working. "I run this company, Claire," Rachel said, her voice low but firm. "Not Dad. And I'm telling you, this isn't the right move. If you want to contribute, there are other ways. You could join the marketing team, help with outreach. But I'm not handing you a division to play with." Claire's smile finally faltered, replaced by a flash of anger. "Play with?" she snapped, leaning forward. "I'm not a child, Rachel. I'm a Brooks, just like you. This company is my legacy too. And frankly, I think you're being selfish. You've had your turn. It's time to share." The words hit Rachel like a slap, echoing the resentment she'd felt growing up, always second to Claire, always the one who had to fight for scraps of attention. But this wasn't a childhood squabble over toys or their father's approval. This was her life's work, her blood and sweat poured into every line of code, every client contract. She wouldn't let Claire guilt her into submission. "Selfish," Rachel said, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "I built this company while you were off planning garden parties. I worked nights, weekends, holidays. Where were you when I was eating ramen to save money for payroll? You don't get to waltz in now and demand a piece of it just because you're bored with your perfect life. Claire's face flushed, but before she could respond, Daniel cut in, his tone smooth but edged with menace. Let's not get emotional, Rachel, he said. This doesn't have to be a fight. Claire has a right to be involved. Legally, she might even have a claim to a stake in the company. We'd hate to take this to court, but if we have to. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Rachel stared at Daniel, her mind racing. A lawsuit. Claire was willing to go that far? She thought of her team, her clients, the years of work that could be undone by a messy legal battle. She thought of her parents, caught in the middle, forced to choose between their daughters. The betrayal cut deeper than she'd expected, a raw wound that made her chest ache. Get out, Rachel said quietly, her voice trembling with rage. Both of you. Now. Claire stood, smoothing her blazer, her composure back in place. Think about my proposal, Rachel, she said. I'll give you a week. But I'm not going away. She turned on her heel and left, Daniel trailing behind her, his smirk lingering in Rachel's mind long after the door closed. Rachel sat there for a long time, the proposal still on her desk, a ticking time bomb. She felt the walls of her office closing in, the weight of Claire's words pressing down on her. She'd always known her sister was ambitious, but this was ruthless. Claire wasn't just after a role in the company. She wanted to take it over, to reshape it in her own image, even if it meant destroying everything Rachel had built. But Rachel wasn't the same woman she'd been a decade ago, the one who'd let doubt and fear hold her back. She'd faced bigger challenges than Claire, investors who'd laughed in her face, competitors who'd tried to steal her ideas, a market that had nearly crushed her in the early years. She'd survived all of it, and she'd survive this too. She just needed a plan. She picked up her phone and dialed Priya, her CFO. We need to move up the board meeting, she said as soon as Priya answered. Today. Claire's making her move, and we need to be ready. Priya didn't hesitate, her voice steady and reassuring. I'll make the calls. We've got your back, Rachel. Next, she called Marcus, asking him to pull data on the company's current projects, to prove to the board that their focus needed to stay on their core mission. She reached out to her lawyer, asking for advice on how to protect the company from a potential lawsuit. And finally she called her mother, her voice breaking as she said, Mom, I need you to talk to Dad. Claire's going to drag us all through the mud if we don't stop her. Ellen's sigh was heavy through the phone. I'll try, sweetheart, she said. But you know how your father is. He just wants the family to be together. He doesn't see what this is doing to you. Rachel hung up, her throat tight. She knew her mother meant well, but Ellen had never been good at standing up to Henry, or to Claire. If Rachel wanted to save her company, she'd have to do it herself. As the day wore on, Rachel prepared for the board meeting, her mind sharp despite her exhaustion. She thought about Claire's proposal, the way it had been designed to appeal to Henry's ego, to the board's desire for growth. She'd need to counter it with hard facts, with a vision of her own, one that kept Brooks Innovations on its steady, successful path. But more than that, she'd need to confront the deeper wound, the betrayal of her family, the realization that Claire didn't just want a piece of the company, she wanted to take it all. By the time the board meeting started, Rachel was ready. She stood at the head of the conference table, her team around her, their faces a mix of concern and determination. She looked at each of them, drawing strength from their loyalty, and then she began to speak, her voice steady, her resolve unyielding. We're facing a challenge, she said. But we've faced challenges before, and we've always come out stronger. Here's how we're going to do it again. The battle lines were drawn, and Rachel Brooks was ready to fight for everything she'd built. 6 months had passed since the board meeting, and Rachel Brooks stood on the stage of a tech conference in San Francisco, the spotlight warm on her face as she accepted an award for Brooks Innovations' innovative software. The applause from the crowd of industry leaders was thunderous, but Rachel's eyes sought out her team in the front row. Priya, Marcus, and the others who'd stood by her through the storm. She smiled, her heart full, knowing this moment was as much theirs as it was hers. The past 6 months had been a crucible. Claire's proposal for Brooke's lifestyle tech had gained traction with some board members, forcing Rachel to fight harder than she ever had. She'd presented her own vision, a plan to expand their core software into new markets while staying true to their mission of empowering small businesses. The board had been split, but Rachel's data, her passion, and her team's loyalty had won them over. Claire's proposal was rejected, and Rachel retained full control of the company. But the victory had come at a cost. Claire had left the board meeting in tears, accusing Rachel of shutting her out of the family legacy. Henry had sided with Claire, refusing to speak to Rachel for weeks, and Ellen had been caught in the middle, her voice trembling as she begged her daughters to reconcile. Rachel had felt the weight of their fractured family like a physical ache, but she'd refused to back down. She'd built Brooke's innovations, and she wouldn't let guilt or sentimentality destroy it. Then, 2 months ago, everything changed. Claire showed up at Rachel's office unannounced, her eyes red, her usual polish replaced by vulnerability. She'd admitted that her marriage to Daniel was crumbling. He'd been the one pushing her to take over the company, hoping to fund his failing law practice. Claire had been desperate to prove herself, to escape the shadow of her failing personal life. "I was wrong," she'd said, her voice breaking. "I didn't see what this company means to you. I'm sorry, Rach." Rachel had listened, her anger melting into something softer, compassion. She'd hugged Claire, the first real embrace they'd shared in years, and they'd talked late into the night, unraveling decades of resentment. Claire didn't want a role in the company anymore, but she asked for something else, a chance to rebuild their sisterhood. Rachel agreed, and slowly, they began to heal. Now, as Rachel stepped off the stage, she saw Claire waiting in the wings, a genuine smile on her face. Henry and Ellen were there too, their hands clasped, their pride evident. The family wasn't perfect, there were still scars, still conversations to be had, but they were together. Rachel had protected her company, but more than that, she'd reclaimed her family. As she joined them, her team cheering behind her, Rachel knew she'd found the balance she'd been fighting for all along. Success on her terms, and a love that endured.